Welcome. I'm the host, Dr. Robert McKinley Gilmore, Sr. of Public Affairs, Public Access. And we are glad to be here this evening to talk about something I think that affects a huge number of individuals in our community. And that is the issue of mental illness and addiction, or addiction and mental illness. And of course, this month, September, is National Recovery Month throughout the United States. A number of activities and events are going on here in the city of Houston, as well as the state of Texas, across the country. Of course, we've had a tremendous number of incidents which have exacerbated the problem. We want you to feel comfortable about calling when that number is put up a little bit later on, but we also want you to be aware that we want to share with you what you can do in terms of dealing with issues of recovery, whether in your own family, your community, or whatever the problem might be. And remember, it also doesn't have to be just drugs. Addiction crosses the barriers. We have two excellent experts who are going to speak to that this afternoon. We certainly want you to pay close attention to what they're going to be saying. We also want to make sure we make some announcements relative to some events that are coming up and how you can connect and get you some support services. Let me open up the floor. I want to welcome both of our guests. Number one, a noted psychologist. She can give you a full title, but she's a psychologist. Dr. P. Ron is here with us this evening, and I want to say welcome again.
Thank you.
To the show.
Thank you, thank you. I'm Dr. Rashida P. Ron. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, been doing this now for over 15 years. Yeah. Yes, been in Houston area 3.
So Dr. P. Ron, you are a clinical psychologist,
yes,
which simply gives credibility to some of the pressing problems we've been seeing in the news recently in terms of psychological behaviors which have led to a number of incidents, some which have been violent. Mm-hmm. And of course, we know that there are some which in some cases lead to incidents which, like for instance, they had a recent drunk driving incident where an officer was injured on the highway, hit, and thank God he wasn't killed, but he was hit by a drunk driver. I think the person was a professional. So Harris County supposedly has one of the largest incidents of DWIs. What is your professional take on this as it relates to mental problems?
In our world, we talk about either comorbidity or dual diagnosis. And what that simply means is people tend to have more than one diagnosis, one in substance abuse as well as, or addiction, or as well as people who might have depression, bipolar, anxiety. And often people self-medicate using drugs. And so the underlying issue really is this person dealing with depression. How do I deal with depression? I go take, some ecstasy to make me feel better, or I go, drink some alcohol to make myself feel better. And we're so used to doing it, we don't even want to feel our feelings. And I think people really downplay how often we use substances to make ourselves feel better instead of actually getting the treatment or the help that we really need.
Well, what is the line? I think there's a line when we say a person has a diagnosis,
yes,
over and against a person who doesn't have a diagnosis but continues to self-medicate, because I guess the question would be, do people need to have the diagnosis to be aware that they need the help, like from you as a professional or even higher up?
I mean, that's a good question. Dylan, or let's just say this, because we're talking about substance abuse, I think there's a distinction. There are people who abuse drugs and people who are addicted. Addicted means you have a physiological dependence on it, meaning your body really craves it. Like we need to eat or drink, their body needs it. And when you have a hangover, when people have hangovers, what that really means is that you imbibe so much drugs the night before, or alcohol, let's say, hours before, that your body at that point is craving it. That is what you're feeling. You're feeling a mild withdrawal. Most people overcome it. It's not a big deal, but it becomes an issue when we start saying, do I have a diagnosis, if you always use a substance to cope, like anytime you're feeling down, you got to go drink something. Anytime you start to feel some anxiousness or you're dealing with a situation, you have to take some type of drug. That's when we start to say you might need to seek help. This is not the occasional person who drinks on occasion or who might do marijuana or something on occasion, but it's more like a regular, this is how I cope, this is how I function on a daily basis.
So with the football season kicking in now,
yes.
and we know that drinking is
Yes.
a part of the behavior,
Yes.
would you say that some people need to be cautioned because they use the football game or the event as an excuse to use more drugs, drink more alcohol, or whatever the case is, even at the tailgating party? We certainly don't want to think that the Texans or the Astros are contributing to the behavior, which could be potentially abnormal in the long run.
Yes, no, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, like I used to do substance abuse groups, and one of the hardest drugs to get rid of or to, I guess, clear your body of is alcohol, because it's such a common, everyone drinks, everyone goes to a party, you want to drink, it's very common. It's easy to give up crack, and I'll say that because you have to actually make an effort to go use crack. You have to hide it more. Alcohol, you don't have to hide it. You can drink in front of people, no one looks at you any different. And so with football season, or, whether it's college, high school, or even, or definitely professional football, people use it as an excuse to drink. The issue becomes, again, like, why are you drinking? Are you just drinking at this particular moment and, after that you're fine? Or is it some underlying issues that are going on within you that you're using alcohol and excuses to party, if you will, to use these drugs?
Excuse to party. We're going to continue our dialogue because there's a tremendous need to address the students. College has started, and if people don't know it, 1/4 of every incoming class drops out the first year because of the use of alcohol or drugs or their inability to be able to cope with school itself. Let me go to now my good professional colleague and friend, Dr. Carl Matthews, who as a pastor and as a community health worker, he's been deeply involved in the community for many years. And how do you see this impacting the community, number one? And of course, how is it that we in the community need to begin to respond?
Well, thank you, Dr. Gilmore. Certainly it's a blessing, as you would say, to be here and with the great Dr. Miss P in this show. How I see it affecting the community is in a very detrimental way. One of the things that helped me understand mental illness and respect it was seeing a skit that Baylor College of Medicine presented about 4 years ago. It really gave me some clarification of how to identify what it looks like and so forth. And so in seeing it in the church and seeing it in my family and the community, I think the first place we need to start is to make information available to educate people about potential symptoms or signs. I think Dr. P gave a very good dissertation in terms of describing addiction versus abuse. I never really quite heard it put that way. And to even hear it from the perspective of entertainment, sports, and et cetera, that means that I think the stats is 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 or something like that. That means all of my associates is, 9 out of 10 probably are undiagnosed but have these issues and not aware of it. And so even for me myself, I think the information is so key, because even when I'm unbalanced psychologically or disturbed emotionally, it helps me chime in to that unbalance and understanding I need to calm down, rethink, meditate, pray, whatever it is I need to get myself centered again. So I think that kind of information is quite needed and necessary. We addressed the issue with the young lady who killed her 2 children. Right. One of the things that was clear to me was the idea that she went to her employer, she engaged with other people. Those were signs, those are indicators, but no one was aware of those indicators because they were not informed about mental illness perhaps. But I think the more we arm ourselves with information and identify it, the better off we can respond. And if we are equipped with information or where to navigate people as a community health worker, that's one of our primary functions, is to identify, assess, and navigate a person to a place where they can get help. And I say this in closing, there is a member that I know affiliated with the church who shared her experience of her husband who was dealing with dementia, and how his behavior was sporadic, a roller coaster, and how she wanted to go to the church, but because of the stigma, how it was demonized, and as a result of that, she went into seclusion, and so she was able only to reach out to a few friends in the faith community that offered her shelter and assistance and support, and it was quite stressful for her. She was impacted, and of course, now she was dysfunction as a result of the dysfunction. What I think the term is transference that was, imposed upon her. However, through that process, she got educated, informed, armed, and she was able to get some support. And now she's taken upon herself to be very instrumental in bringing that information to the faith community. So that's really one place I think we really should start. That's my focus, is to start in the faith community to help implement at least some kind of ministry that will help people understand how to identify what the symptoms are and what mental illness is and the levels of mental illness and how it impacts the lives of people.
Let me share the definition. The World Health Organization has a definition that we received in our training when we went to Washington.
Sure.
But I kept it, and it says, it defines mental health as a state of well-being in which the individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life. I need to say that again.
Yes.
Sure.
Can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. Now, that's the World Health Organization definition that kind of encompasses mental health. And when you mention the faith community involvement, because there's such a line between the reality of secular behavior, you drunk at the party, now you finna run into 3 police officers and a school bus, or you heard voices and you said the devil made you do it. I think there was an incident not a couple of days ago in a city where the gentleman shot 2 girls walking home from school, one black, one white, and killed one and wounded severely the other one. And they caught him. He said the devil made him do it. We're talking mental illness on one side, we're talking addiction or drug abuse on the other side. And remember now, central focus of my thought was that we're trying to make people aware, just like the effort has been around the country, that recovery is real.
Yes.
So I'm looking at it both ways, How do you begin this process of recovery? How do you interject into a person who thinks they're professional, working every day, everything is fine, but they have a problem going to the happy hour with nobody to drive the car, whatever. And then at the same time, so stressed out that the voices come.
Yes.
Dr. P, would you like to address?
Yeah, I mean, when you said the World Health Organization definition, I was like, yes, coping. Like normal is, we have stressors every day, whether it's our job, whether it's traffic, whether it's dealing with your family.
Say traffic again.
Yes, traffic again. Houston traffic, yes. But with that said, when I think about, just so people can kind of get an idea of what's going on in the brain, if you will, when anyone has any type of quote unquote, whether it's depression, anxiety, and I'm talking about the kind that's more diagnosable, what happens is your neurotransmitters, and I'm saying it real briefly, your neurotransmitters are not working as they should. And you see all these commercials about the medications that if you take it's going to affect this particular neurotransmitter. When you use drugs, it almost acts like the medicine. This is when we talk about self-medication. So when you are, drinking alcohol, or when you are using marijuana or cocaine or ecstasy or, Xanax, whatever drug that you're using, it is actually changing the way that your brain works. This is why you feel different. And this is why people start to say, like, oh, I felt better. Like all the anxiety I had, the stress I had, I feel better. And so what happens is if you continue to use it, your brain starts to adjust to it and want to keep using it. This is why people tell you anyway, like if you use any type of drug, whether it's something that's prescribed or if it's aspirin, the more you take it, you have to take more. Your body gets used to it.
Even with aspirin?
Yeah, even with aspirin. So this is where we talk about addiction comes from, how people who may not, they might say, I just use it once or twice. But if you continue to use it over time, you become more, I need to have more to feel what I felt that made me feel so good. And when we start talking about coping, again, we are such a society that we, show how, I give an example. When I used to teach at Southern University in Baton Rouge, some of my students, I can tell they smell like marijuana. They came in obviously high. And one of my students even told me, like, when I'm high, I do better. Like, I study better, I learn better. And I said, well, you know what? It's not that the marijuana is making you better. What it is, you are probably anxious. And the marijuana is calming you enough so you can really receive. Or you have attention issues, and the marijuana is working in your brain enough so that you can pay attention. So it's really something else that's going on, but you're using the marijuana to cope. And so it's about really understanding that and not just looking at it like, oh, I'm just taking this drug, I'm just taking this alcohol. But it really does change the way your brain waves work.
Well, I mean, you're in a vital point because America now has accepted marijuana for medical purposes in well over, I think it's almost 30 states.
Several, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's supposed to be on the ballot in Texas again. And of course, some states, 2 or 3 states, have made recreational use legal, And so are we at a line where the medical community in 30 states are saying it's okay?
It's more of a benefit, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, how does that make a person feel like they not doing anything that's not wrong?
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, you can look at it like when people, as everyone knows, at one point alcohol was illegal.
Right.
At one point people bootleg it. Al Capone was in trouble for selling alcohol.
Right.
So if we look at our history, alcohol had that same, also we made it legal, and now we have more problems with people drinking, because that is the number one issue when people are in recovery groups is alcohol, more so than any other drug. So what happens when marijuana becomes, legal everywhere? My guess is there's going to be more problems that come from using it.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't have benefits, but anything that you overuse, which people will, can cause other problems that we have not thought about. And so, yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. P. One of the things I think is there's a place in the scripture that says, "What a man thinketh, so is he." And I believe that what has happened in our culture is that these different things, alcohol, drugs, and other things have become a part of a culture that people have resorted to for a way out to cope, as you alluded to. But what would we do if those things was not available? If they wasn't present, what would we resort to then? It's amazing to me how we spend money on 24-hour fitness for our physical fitness. We spend money on our nails, our feet. We spend money on clothes that look good. We spend money on our hair to the barber shop, the beauty shop. But we don't spend any time or any resources on our mind in getting healthy. I think one of the things that has to be, offered, instead of picking up a drink, why not trying yoga? Why not resort to exercise, working out? That can be just as therapeutic and even more healthier than drinking a fifth of Cavassier, or smoking a half a pound of weed or whatever it is, And so, I think we've been inundated in our culture with these, and some of my finding and readings will allude to theologically that pharmaceuticals is considered to be a form of demonic and witchcraft and other things, you know. Now, you know, I don't know how factual that is, but some of my reading has kind of alluded to that fact. You know, it's kind of personal with me, my friend, because my son, who celebrated his 25th birthday on yesterday, we had a great time yesterday morning, fellowshipping in the spirit, praying, which is something that I enjoy doing with my son. But one of the things that he did on the video chat was talked about how he came out of depression. My son attempted to commit suicide over 7 times. My son has been delivered from the lifestyle of homosexuality. You know, my thing was to seek and search what caused the dysfunction in his life. And of course, I went on my research to look at some of Sigmund Freud's stuff that talked about the behavior of gender identity and the absence of an adult cultivating and nurturing him in a proper way. And I had to admit that I had abdicated some of my responsibilities as a father. Although I made Barney available, Raymond Noodles available, and going to the Harlem Globetrotters circles available, but the being home to nurture and guide and instruct and help mature him was rather absent. And so some of you know, that responsibility, I think the value of cultivating our families and some of the dysfunctional things that goes on in our family has been those contributing factors that has caused us to start gravitating to other things. I love the fact in your book, Hope After Dope, that helped me. I think it's the first chapter that talks about innocence. When you have your child to go to the refrigerator and get you a beer, you are now planting a seed or tilling the ground for that behavior to start developing. Or you have your child to go and light your cigarette, like my mother used to do me. And of course, she's around the corner, I'm gonna take a puff.
Right.
You know, and so before you know it, and then so that environment creates a atmosphere that it's okay to do it. And so, you know, we have really need to analyze and go back and reevaluate and assess what kind of environments are we creating in our homes.
But you brought up another observational point that needs to be, you know, looked at in terms of recovery, because is the environment conducive for recovery? If everybody in the environment is kind of dealing with their own issues, you see, and they're not resolved, is the environment conducive? One of the things we want to do this month, and they've been doing all over the country, is encouraging leaders, whether you're a faith-based leader, a civic leader, business leader, to let your employees have a discussion about issues of recovery. People know more than they might let on to, and they might be observing some things in certain employees, family members, church members, which you might not see. But to let them have the discussion and maybe bring out some ways that they can communicate that they might possibly need help. I know, Dr. B-Ron, you have with employee assistance programs, you can access, obviously. That's isn't that a viable way?
Yes, a viable way. If you are like, I don't know where to go, many companies have EAPs, and that's employee assistance programs that will, you know, provide counselors for you. Many of if you have insurance, a lot of your insurance would allow you to see different counselors throughout the area. If you have these issues in terms of, you know, coping with life, you know, trying to find the right ways to cope. And kind of picking back what you saying about, and what you said about the environment, it's very important when we talk about recovery. First, you have to recognize you have an issue, but let's say you recognize it. Sometimes you have to eliminate your environment. That's very difficult. And I can give you an example. Once I worked with a young man, he was 15 years old, and he smoked marijuana almost daily, kept getting in trouble because he was coming to school high and suspension, and he came to see me. And he was just very resistant to this whole therapy process because he really didn't see anything wrong with smoking marijuana. He was like, what's the big deal? It's from the earth, it's natural.
That's the Bible view now.
Exactly.
That's the Bible.
Yes.
God
made it. So, hey. So that was his whole thing. And it was, you know, and we worked with him for a long time. This probably went on about 2 months. He met with me 3 times a week because this is how intense it was for him. And one day he finally said, he was like, I just resent that my mother's making me come here. And I'm like, because she wants better for you. He was like, no, because my dad uses cocaine.
What?
Yes. So my mother's forcing me to get help, but not touching my dad.
No.
Yes. And so he was like, why should I get clean on something that's not as dangerous or as, harmful as cocaine? My dad has lost jobs for it. I'm not losing any jobs. Like his whole, like it was hard to, his logic made sense to me. Like, why should I give up marijuana when you don't tell my father, your husband, that I won't tolerate you using cocaine?
That's a good observation, though.
Yes.
Can family dysfunction prevent the real person from beginning the true recovery for the family? As an adult, it's okay.
Yes. Yes, and in his case, what we had to work on with him was, and that was very difficult because he had a lot of resentment toward his father, kind of going with you saying he felt like his father really wasn't there for him because he was high a lot. And he saw the destruction that it caused to the family. So that's what I focused on in therapy with him. Now that I knew more what was going on family-wise, we focused on that. And I was like, marijuana tends to be a gateway drug. Not for everybody. There's some people who smoke marijuana their whole life and never go to something harsher. But there are a number of people who will. And given that his father, and I told him, given that your father uses cocaine, you've known that for years, more than likely you're probably going to try something harder just because you've been exposed to it. And I was like, you saw the destruction it caused to your family and how it is still causing. What are you going to do different? And when I saw it, I said, you wanted to kill your father at one point. That's how mad you were with him. So what are you going to do different? And that seemed to wake him up. That made him look at marijuana differently. And he started saying, like, you know what, I need to get clean. I need to not do this. And he was like, and I have to understand that no matter how I feel about my father, that's his own battle he has to take. And I have to take mine.
Yeah, he was willing to think about killing his father.
Yes.
I think that's, to me, the most detrimental aspect that a person would be thinking about killing their father. Let me go there for a minute, because when you start talking about if you don't get the recovery, if you don't admit and deal with these real issues, the criminal behavior is a result of the lack of, the lack of you getting
unmanaged anger.
Huh?
The unmanaged anger.
Right. But do you think that by itself it stops the whole process of recovery? We saying recovery, but if you got to go to court to get recovery issues resolved,
right? I think that's really extreme, and unfortunately for some people, it has to become that extreme before they recover. I know in Pennsylvania, Bethesda Ministry had a great program initiative to where every brother had to write a letter to the person he was angry with. Many of them were angry with their fathers. And one of the things that they pointed out was that one of the most unsafest place in America was not the school, not the church, not the community, but the home, because that was the first place of experiencing pain in a real way from the person that they love the most. And so, I think that actualization of discovering, not until you identify that place that spent you out of control, then will you then decide to get help and realize that there's a problem. Otherwise it continues to, grow, manifest.
and you find yourself.
And you find yourself extreme. And that could be whatever, murder, whatever.
Well, interesting point. Now we've got attorney Laurie, great James. She's here with us, and you are a
criminal defense lawyer,
Yeah.
and I do litigation, a lot of civil litigation as well. But what's interesting to talk about the family dynamic.
Right.
When a person does reach a point where, say, they commit a crime.
Right.
That charging instrument, that indictment, which is all an indictment is a charging instrument to tell you what the charges are, will be styled the state of Texas or whichever state versus that person. So what that tells us is that when things happen to our neighbor, it affects us all. So if you are not well at home and you have an anger problem and you lash out and you strike someone, or you have a mental problem, or whatever is the problem, and it winds up in the courtroom, then that is a problem for all of us. And so how will we as a society, how are we going to address it if the need is that you need to seek counseling, seek some sort of rehabilitation, get on your medical, whatever it is, the medical regimen that your doctor would have prescribed to you. So that's what the legal system is saying. It has to work in partnership with a person.
Without, you saying, in other words, before it gets to the charging.
Well, unfortunately, when we see it, they're already charged. It's there. You're facing a charge. But then, as I heard just earlier this week, well, this is the charge, Attorney Gray, but I had all these other problems that contributed to this. In the ordinary, I wouldn't have done this. But because I didn't have this type of resource, this is what happened.
I think that's a very valid point. I mean, I thank you for raising that issue, because even if we're going to talk about, Dr. Gilmore, prevention, then the question does become, where are the resources? Where do I get support if I don't have the finances and resources to get the support? Is there enough resources available to get the support? And all these agencies and other people working together to give persons the kind of support that they need.
And
now, one of the things that, even with working with the school system, there have been several suggestions to work with them to come in and to assess children, to assess their living environment, to assess their needs, to assess the parents' needs, and so forth. But for some apparent reason, people don't want to hear that, and they keep coming up with this same different practice that's ineffective, And I always say, I don't ever want to go to a doctor and a doctor prescribe me a medication without first assessing what I need medication for.
Yeah.
Well, and I was just going to say that in looking at it, we have to look at it from a total assessment, from the legal, the medical, your community, your church. Is this about punishment, or is this about some sort of rehabilitation? And we ask that question as lawyers a lot of times when we're picking juries, because we want to know, what is your perspective that you're going to look at this? Are you going to look at it solely, let's just lock them all up, just throw away the key, and they have a problem, I don't? Or are we going to look at them and say, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem, and there is something that I can do, and there are resources that are out there. Let's try that. That is something that we, as a citizen, as a society, need to determine. Do we really want to help?
I want to just add that when we talk about behavior, all behavior means something. All behavior, whatever we're doing, it comes from something.
What do you mean by that statement, all behavior?
No matter what we're doing, whether we're doing the right, quote unquote, right thing or the bad thing, it all means something that is coming from somewhere. That's so if someone, does commit a horrible crime, what caused that person, it's like a chain of events that led to this. I like to think of when we're first born, we're all these blank slates, but different experiences, different life challenges shape this person to making these choices. And so when we talk about that all behavior means something, whether it ends with us in the criminal justice system or you are living a good life, quote unquote, the first thing we have to realize when we talk about that, at the same time we talk about behavior means something, behavior is also hard to change. So even though we might have access to resources, we might have, who we are as people, and I'm in the field of changing. I still have behaviors in myself that is difficult to change. And so when we talk about recovery or, rehabilitation, and we have to be, I guess, cognizant of the fact that behavior is hard to change. But can we change it? Yes. But we have to get to the root of why we're doing something. Because often you just say, I just need you to stop doing it. I need you to stop smoking weed. Or I need you to stop stealing from others. But we don't really find out why'd you steal in the first place. You know, why are you breaking in people's homes? Why are you selling drugs? Like, we don't look into that. We just, like you said, we have we come from a society that, I come from Louisiana, which has, I believe, the largest prison with Angola in the country, if I'm not mistaken. But it's all geared toward punishment, not saying what and of course people are tired of hearing that, oh, that's a sob story, people say this, whatever, you know what's right, you know what's wrong. But I know in my work, I've met so many people that it's no wonder they made that choice. Like when all the stuff they've been through, I'm like, I see why you made that choice. I don't know if I would have made a different, I don't know if I wouldn't have, if I would have been, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think when we talk about recovery, it's that same thing. Like something led that person to using and abusing drugs to the point that now they're either in the court system, because most people on probation get drug screened as a part of it's just regular, like that's just a part of it, because they recognize that most people that's involved in the court system probably are using.
This is a generic question for all of you.
Mm-hmm.
So with this being National Recovery Month, and we seeing, in the news every day situations, how young should the intervention really begin?
I would say from my experience in just trying to deal with my son,
Right.
I would say as early as 3 years old.
No.
Because one of the things that was pointed out was that is the most formative point of a child development in their thinking, in their psychological processing. So as young as 3 years old, and I have been in some meetings where they've talked about how that person even need engagement up to 12, and after 12, how potentially it could be a little late to do so because they've kind of internalized, their thought about what they're going to be or what they're going to do and this kind of thing. So I would say for me 3 years old.
You say coming out of the terrible twos.
Yes.
Which we all know that when you're a terrible two,
Yeah.
you wreak havoc anyhow.
And
Yes,
instead
anyway.
of responding by saying, "Oh, that's so cute," then what you find is that it grows into an adult
Yeah.
that
With the same
becomes an
behavior.
ugly situation.
Yes, it's not cute. Now
It's
you're
not
20.
cute
It's
anymore,
not cute when
you
you're
know.
20.
What you say, doctor?
It's not cute when you're 20 doing what you did at 2.
No, it's not.
Yeah, what you say, doctor? How you?
Yeah. No, I mean, actually, if we're going back, you said intervention. And I'm thinking intervention to me means they've already started acting in such a way. So I'd rather say prevention, if you will. How are we going to prevent this? I mean, that's just, when you say intervention is what I think.
Prevention's a good term.
Yeah. But how do we even, and if you don't bond, if a baby doesn't bond with one person between birth to 6 months, they never are able to bond. Or is that young. So you'll have difficulty. Yes, you will have difficulty attaching to anyone if you don't have. It doesn't have to be the mom or dad, but it has to be some primary caregiver that is attending to that child's needs, that baby's needs. And if it is not met, that particular person. This is why people who are in foster care system, and different, have different bonding issues with their parents. That's why postpartum depression, all that is very important to deal with, because that's how important it is to bond. Because if you don't bond with someone between birth to 6 months, the rest of your life you will struggle with that. And if you can't really bond with people, then you start to lose empathy. And that can cause other issues, which can lead to criminal acts, can lead to, of course, I don't care about people, I don't care about life. And so when we talk about prevention, it starts even, earlier than that, just the whole formation of, I'm trying to go back to this healthy person who can cope with life. And how do you cope? You have to have relationships with people to help you cope. Lonely people, when you hear about these people, they usually are lonely. When they go do these, go postal, if you will, or these mass shootings, they usually label them as people who were loners, who kept to themselves. You don't find people who come from very good families who love their families, love to be around them. They just don't usually engage in that because they have that relationship. And so for me, just I would say it probably starts even younger than that.
Sure.
And I would agree with both of you, what you've said, that we all start out very early knowing what's right and what's wrong. We have early memories of don't do this because of this result will happen. And so it's not too young to start to talk about their consequences for our actions. You know, don't touch a hot iron, it's gonna hurt. Don't stick your finger inside of a plug. I had my nieces over, and they were looking in the garage where we had put down poison in the garage. And one of them looked and said, "Why is there candy on the ground in the garage?" And the question really had me to think again. I put it down as poison, and they saw it as candy. So it was a teachable moment for me to say, it might look like candy, but it's not candy. Why? What will it do? Well, it will hurt you. And that was the end of it. I see this. It might look shiny and as if it tastes good, but it's really poison. And we can start teaching very early that, you know, things that are not good for us are poison, and it will cause a problem.
Yes.
Is that and when you start thinking about recovery and how difficult it is, it's not as easy as people think.
Right.
Not at all.
You know, it's not as easy as
No.
who then becomes found thought, who then becomes the major motivator for a person? Is it the court system? Is it the employer saying, you know, you'll lose your job? Is it the preacher saying you're going to hell?
Well,
I guess that's, you know, I want y'all to get that from a found perspective.
Sure.
Who is the major motivator then?
well, you know, I you know, certainly being a preacher of the gospel and my conviction and belief, I believe that it becomes spiritual, that spiritual experience and encounter that cause a person to desire to transform their way of thinking. I think it has to be something bigger than the substance itself, something larger than the pain itself, something even larger than the experience and the result of the poison that you shouldn't have touched. The results of that, and I believe that's spiritual, that transforms the heart and the mind of a person to modify or have a corrected behavior. And I love that term, behavior, because that's what we deal with. Even as we talk about sin from the pulpit, what we're really talking about are people behaviors and their patterns and what they're doing. And so even to see someone make a transition, or you see something different, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, you know. And so I believe it's spiritual. And I believe so therefore it does come from the pulpit.
I'd like to chime in to say, many cases, it's the fear of being locked away from your loved ones. And in many cases, I've seen, I've talked to clients, one comes to mind that said, look, Lori, I could get any amount of drugs that I want. I make a lot of money. I can purchase what I want to buy and use it as long as I want to. But when this person was caught and facing 25 years, being locked away from their family, that was enough to say, you know what, that's over. That's history. I don't want to pay that type of punishment. And a lot of times that is just the thing to say, what is it about this rehab? What is it that I can do other than that? And so it has been a deterrent. It's not the only deterrent. Certainly faith, I would agree, is a large part of it, but the cold reality that you're going to be locked up and you're going to be away from everything that you love and you know is enough for someone to say, you know what, maybe I need to think about what can I do to avoid that.
And I think it really depends on the person when we talk about motivation. When I did my work with substance abuse groups, it was within the concept of Christian base. And we had church every Friday. And I did find that a lot of people who were abusing drugs, turning their life over to Christ or to God seemed to help. But then we had some who were court ordered and they were like, I don't want to go, I'm on probation, I don't want to go back. And so their focus in the group was more about, I don't want to go back. And for others, it was, my family's upset with me, and I don't want to lose my family. So I do think, and then for some people, just their own, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I hate not being in control. Because some people want to be in control of their lives, and when you're on drugs, you're no longer in control. When you are, abusing substances, or even when you just use drugs for a little bit, at that moment, you're not in control. And so I do think it depends on a person's different motivators. But for every person, it has to be, it's individual. Like you might say, I'm going to, if you don't stop, you're going to jail, and that person still can't stop, end up going to jail, because for that person, that wasn't enough, or losing their family wasn't enough, or coming to the Lord wasn't enough. So for each person is a motivator. What I find is that people who have the issue, who keep going in and out of relapse, they haven't yet found that motivator to make them really stop. Because I do believe that for every behavior, there's a cause, and you find that root cause, and you can really handle it. Yeah. The behavior that was negative can end.
This month is National Recovery Month, and across the country there have been efforts and continue to be efforts to encourage individuals, whether at your church, your organization, your job, to address the issues. Of course, we know we have organizations here in Houston, Mental Health Association Houston chapter, National Association of Mental Illness, and of course the Gulf Coast of Texas African American Family Conference, Support Conference. They're having a conference coming up in October the 8th. And these are different places that you can go to. I know as a veteran, they have programs tied in with the VA. And you have programs in your local church. But whatever it is, you need to find out how you can intervene. I guess that's a final observation for you to comment on. The intervention. Intervention is whether it's from the court, and you've done something, or whether you've been mandated by the job, or your family says, I can't take it no more, and the pastor and everybody said, look, you need help. How significant should people be with intervention? Final thoughts on that. We come to a close.
Ooh, how significant. I mean, if drug use addiction is causing you harm, because when we talk about abnormal, normal behavior, when you can no longer function as you normally would, that is when you need that help. Intervention is very difficult because, again, we're talking about something that your body either craves or this is how you cope. And so family members, friends, have to be understanding of why sometimes they cannot do the same things as used to do. Like, you want to come to a party, they might say, I can't come to this party because I know there'll be alcohol there. And families might be like, you're going to be fine, come on, you're going to be fine. And that person says, no, I can't. As a family member, if you understand that is a trigger for me. If I go to this party, I'm going to drink. And to be understanding of that, to say, okay, we won't have alcohol at this party. Most families are not like that. They're like, that's your issue. We're going to have, this is it. But it is. So it's kind of like so it's like how it's really understanding. It's not just that particular person understanding, but also the family members around them or friends understanding what you're going through, because people, dismiss addiction. They don't think it's a big deal. They don't, they think you can give it up if you really wanted to. You can stop today if you wanted to. Well, I argue, I love French fries. I try to give myself, I'm not eating French fries for a week, and I was at McDonald's the next day. But, it's just and that's just French fries.
Sure.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just something simple. But imagine if the drug is in your system. Exactly. It's I got to stop at that McDonald's on my way home, even though I just told my group that I will not do fries as an honor of...
Nobody's looking.
Yes, nobody's looking. I told them I would not do fries.
Me and God.
Yes. But, my point is that it's hard. When we say we're not going to do something, even though we know it's detrimental to our health, we still find ourselves doing it. And so, but we expect people who are going through addiction to just stop. You're good. You see what it's causing to the family, stop using.
I think we have to speak up. We always did. There was somebody. There was Big Mama. There was the neighbor. There was somebody that cared enough to say, you don't look good. Something is changing. We always get a better result in the law when we can see a loved one, a parent, someone there standing before that bench. And you think about that person being charged with a crime and standing there alone. And comparing and contrasting that person standing there with their whole family. Right there, it says two things. It says to that judge or that jury that, you know what, you may not care, we may not care, but these people standing here care. And the more that they're there, you're looking and you're thinking, I wonder why they're here. Why do they care? And it becomes a curious thing to curious and contagious. Well, if they care, if they believe in this person, and they certainly know them far better than I am, just going to render an opinion on them, but you have the teacher. You have someone who's known them all their life. You have the pastor, someone who's watched them go to church on Sunday and get involved in events. And then you hear from them. And they can really provide insight into them, then that intervention can be the difference between a whole lot of time in prison or let's try to give this person a second chance and send them off to rehab. You know, there's something out there. I think that we are our brother's keeper, whether we want to be or not. And it doesn't mean that we have to go and knock on someone's doors and get into their business. But don't we all like it when someone of our friends sees something about us, notice something, and they say, I noticed this about you? And you don't automatically get angry about it. You're like, okay, you noticed something. You know, maybe there's something to this. And I think that when we do this, then we can move towards more people getting the help because they may not even know it. But I might.
Sure. Well, Huckleberry Finn say there are two most important days of our life. The day that we're born and the day we figure out why.
Oh, okay.
And I believe that you know, one of the points that Dr. P made is that when a person gets to a place of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, number one. Number two, recognize that their behavior has been very destructive and not constructive. And get the help that they need, then transformation can really come. My final point and thought is to the church is that we need to stop being so conventional and cookie cutter in our approach in ministry. We need to have days where we have a drug day to talk about drugs, the different types of drugs, the effects of drugs, people who've overcome drugs, how it's destructive in the behavior. I never shall forget, on my way to church one morning, I picked up a sister, inviting her to church, and she said, whoever made crack and cocaine need to die and go to hell, because how it had affected her and caused destructiveness between her and her family. And so we need, as a faith community, we need to start talking about alcohol, the usage of, we need to start talking about the behavior of irresponsible sex. We need to have some real discussions and quit making like it's a one-all, fix-all and going through the same standard procedure. Sometimes Sunday school don't need to be Sunday school. It needs to be education about life issues and challenges that are affecting the lives of families that are sitting in the pews of our churches. And those who are caregivers to those who may be impacted by someone who they got to be locked up in their bedroom because they have a throwed-off son who's affected by some addiction and stealing everything. We have to really address those things, and we have to use theology. We have to use professional people like Dr. P and yourself and Dr. Laurie and others and other health institutions. And health institutions, you need to come out of your ivory towers, and you need to start becoming more user-friendly to the faith community and being transparent and working with the faith community, because they are the boots on the ground who can make a difference. They feel the pulse of the people, and we know where the problems are, and we need to get help in our community. Otherwise, this issue that we've been seeing of crime, these heinous crimes that's been going on, is going to continue to increase. And me, quite frankly, I'm just tired of faking and pontificating as though things are well when it's not. The house is on fire.
Thank you. Thank you very much to all of you. the legal opinion, the professional opinion, the church opinion. Thank you very much. This again is National Recovery Month throughout the United States of America. I've been your host. I'm just glad to be able to have the kind of professional voices you heard. And hopefully we'll continue this dialogue and discussion. Maybe you learned something you can share with somebody else, but you heard it right here at the Houston Media Source Public Affairs Public Access Show. And I'm always glad to bring you the top professionals in their fields who can at least give you some enlightenment of what's going on. Don't forget, I did tell you about the Gulf Coast of Texas African American Family Conference. It's going to be on October the 8th. They're going to be dealing with unveiling masks, the real conversation, shouting myths, whatever you can do. Find more information. Call the station, let us know. Check your Facebook. There are ways that you can access these organizations and groups to help you. But whatever you do, get you some help. Get some help for your loved ones. Until we can meet again, I'm just going to say it's a blessing to have been here. Public Affairs, Public Access, Houston Media Source. I've been your host, Dr. Robert McKinley Gilmore, Sr. It's a blessing. Thank you so much.